drawn and redrawn, the making of India's internal boundaries. Hi, and welcome back to India State Stories.
In the last episode, we looked at the partition of India. Now with the new season, we turn towards the integration. In this season, we will explore the nitty-gritty of the integration process. Imagine over 560 princely states suddenly freed from the British rule. This posed a massive threat of balkanisation of India. This episode explores the critical process of accession, where states joined India on three key subjects: defense, external affairs, and communications. Learn how this evolved into mergers, unions, and centrally administered areas.
More details are in the show notes below, and let's dive into the conversation.
Imagine a country on the very precipice of independence, but it's not. Well, it's not a single unified landmass. Instead, picture a bewildering jigsaw puzzle. Over 560 pieces, maybe more. Each piece governed by its own ruler, steeped in its own traditions, nursing its own aspirations. That was India in 1947. Not just a vast subcontinent, but this really complex tapestry of autonomous princely states. And each one was a potential fault line, a looming point of fragmentation. Today, in the deep dive, we're plunging into one of the most monumental, almost miraculous processes in modern history: the integration of these hundreds of princely states into a cohesive, unified India. We're going to try and uncover the brilliant strategies, highlight the indispensable key players, and really grasp the lasting impact of this. Well, a credible feat of nation building. Our mission really is to give you a shortcut, a way to get well informed on this absolutely critical yet often overlooked period. We're pulling from pivotal historical accounts, VP Menon's first-hand narrative, the States Reorganization Committee report, some recent analyses too. Just trying to understand how India transformed from this diverse collection of states into one nation. So let's set the scene for this extraordinary challenge. The British, during their colonial rule, had established what was known as paramountcy over these princely states. This basically meant the crown exercised supreme authority, managing their external affairs and defense, while allowing rulers internal autonomy. But as India's independence drew near, a crucial deadline approached. The British government announced that this paramountcy would simply lapse on June 3, 1947. What did lapse of paramountcy truly signify for these states? Why was it such a profound moment?
It's astonishing when you think about the scale of the challenge this created. The lapse of paramountcy. Well, it didn't mean these states would automatically join India or Pakistan. Not at all. It meant they would revert to what was termed political isolation. Essentially, their relationship with the British Crown would just end, and they'd become legally independent entities. Now, the Indian Independence Act of 1947 gave them the option to accede, to join either of the new dominions, India or Pakistan. But critically, it didn't compel them, it didn't force them. So suddenly you have over 560 states, some huge, like France, others tiny, barely a village, each with its own ruler, facing a choice that could easily lead to widespread confusion, internal power struggles, anarchy even, and ultimately the balkanization of the entire subcontinent. The very idea of India as a unified nation was genuinely at stake.
And that's precisely where the chilling realization must have hit the Congress leaders. Independence could quickly unravel into chaos. They grasped that a truly unified political structure wasn't just some political ideal, it was the absolute bedrock, essential to prevent these states from maybe aligning with Pakistan. Or worse, just shattering the very idea of India by declaring complete independence. The stakes were, well, nothing short of the nation's survival. So with the clock ticking, this monumental task ahead was the very first step the new India leadership took. How did they even begin to stitch these disparate pieces together? Who were the architects behind this initial push for unity?
Right. That's where the newly formed States Department became so pivotal, absolutely crucial. It was spearheaded by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel as the Minister of States, working hand in glove with VP Menon, the administrative head. Their collaboration was, frankly, legendary. But the fundamental question they faced was immense. How do you convince hundreds of independent rulers, each with their own history, their own agenda, to join a new India without immediately resorting to force? Their ingenious solution for that initial accession, it drew inspiration from the Government of India Act of 1935. But it was really a masterstroke of strategic compromise, tailored perfectly for that moment.
Okay, what was the essence of that strategic compromise? How did they manage to offer something appealing enough to secure accession without stripping away too much power right away?
It was a brilliant strategic gambit, really. The plan proposed that states would initially accede on only three core subjects: defense, external affairs, and communications. Just those three. Now, this wasn't just a compromise. It was an incredibly shrewd move. By demanding only these three areas, Patel and Menon addressed the immediate existential threats to a unified India, preventing external meddling, ensuring national security, maintaining essential infrastructure like postal services. But crucially, it left the rulers enough internal autonomy. Enough for them to feel their power wasn't being completely stripped away overnight. It bought crucial time, minimized immediate resistance, and allowed the new nation to consolidate before tackling deeper integration later on. It really secured the basic functional unity of India without that abrupt loss of internal sovereignty for the rulers.
And to sweeten the deal, perhaps, or maybe more accurately, to ensure a smooth transition and continuity, an accompanying standstill agreement was also drafted and circulated. What did that agreement entail? How did it help?
The standstill agreement. Yes, that was clever too, because it provided for the continuation of all existing arrangements between the states and the Dominion of India on matters of common concern. Things like shared postal services, customs, economic ties, they could continue seamlessly. But, and this was the critical leverage it was, conditional on accession. No accession, no standstill agreement, simple as that. It created a very practical incentive, making it easier for states to join by assuring them that their day-to-day administrative links wouldn't be abruptly severed. It avoided immediate chaos.
Okay, so the plan's in place. But they needed a powerful voice, didn't they?
Yeah.
So someone to deliver this message directly to the rulers. And this came in the form of Lord Mountbatten, the last viceroy, the crown representative. On July 25, 1947, he addressed a special meeting with the Chamber of Princes, urging them to accede. How persuasive did he actually need to be? I mean, convincing hundreds of rulers to sign away parts of their centuries-old autonomy sounds daunting.
It's almost mind-boggling, isn't it? The sheer persuasive power needed there. Mountbatten's intervention was absolutely critical, no doubt about it. He strongly urged the rulers to accede, not just for India's stability, but framed it as being vital for the long-term viability of their own states. He emphasized that the alternative was isolation, maybe even anarchy, and crucially, he provided rock-solid assurances. Accession on these three subjects would involve no financial liability for the rulers, and significantly, it would not encroach on their internal sovereignty and other matters. That was key. This was the limited accession argument, really designed to calm fears of total absorption. His personal appeal, leveraging his position as the outgoing crown representative, combined with the clear benefits and limited scope of accession, it was incredibly effective.
And the speed of the outcome, especially in light of how complex it all was, that was truly remarkable. By August 15th, 1947, the very day of India's independence, nearly all states within India's geographical limits had acceded to the Indian Dominion. Now, of course, there were those three notable exceptions that would become major challenges later: Hyderabad, Kashmir, and Junagadh. We know about those. But beneath that quick success, were there underlying tensions? Or maybe forms of resistance that Mountbatten's persuasion couldn't fully smooth over for the long run?
Absolutely. Yes. While the initial accession secured India's territorial integrity, which was the primary goal at that point, it's vital to understand something else. Not all instruments of accession were identical. They couldn't be. This reflected the immense diversity among the princely states in size and power, even in their historical legal status. Some were truly powerful kingdoms, others were, well, tiny land holdings, effectively. So this meant a one-size-fits-all approach simply wouldn't work. And these differing terms of accession certainly laid the groundwork for future complexities down the line.
That's a crucial distinction. Our sources highlight two main types of instruments. For the 140 fully empowered states, accession covered those three key subjects we mentioned: defense, external affairs, communications, as defined in the 1935 Act. Pretty straightforward. But then you had over 300 semi-jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional estates and talukas, many in areas like Kathiawar and Gujarat. Smaller entities. For these, a different instrument was prepared. Now, while it still preserved the form of accession, it crucially vested all the residuary powers and jurisdiction directly in the central government. So this meant these smaller rulers effectively surrendered their internal sovereignty right from day one, unlike their larger counterparts who kept more control, at least initially.
You've hit on the critical point there. Exactly. While this tailored approach certainly helps secure India's initial integrity, getting almost everyone on board was the priority. This initial accession was by no means the final solution, not even close. The journey was far from over. It was merely the first, albeit absolutely critical step in a much longer process of truly integrating and unifying the nation.
Right, and that leads us perfectly into the next phase of this integration. Once initial accession was largely complete, the monumental challenge shifted. It shifted to consolidating these myriad states into viable administrative units and, crucially, democratizing them. And this clearly wasn't a uniform process either. It unfolded through several distinct patterns, didn't it?
Precisely. You can broadly see three processes at play. First, you had the merger with provinces. This was perhaps the most straightforward. States that were geographically right next to existing provinces were simply merged into them. Think of the Orissa and Chhattisgarh states, which were among the first, or the Deccan and Gujarat states later on. Their administration just transferred to the provincial governments, and constitutionally, they became integral parts of those provinces. Second, some states were designated as centrally administered areas. These were taken over either individually or sometimes in groups and run directly by the central government as what were called chief commissioners' provinces. Examples include the Punjab Hill states, Bilaspur, Tripura, and Manipur. This brought them under the direct, centralized control of the new government of India, often because of their strategic location or perhaps their smaller size, making them less viable on their own. And third, maybe the most innovative approach, was the formation of unions of states. This involved integrating the territories of multiple starts to create entirely new, larger, and hopefully more viable administrative units. Major examples here include Saurashtra, Madhya Bharat, the Patiala and East Punjab States Union, which everyone knew as PPSU, the United States of Rajasthan, and Travancore Cochin. For these unions, special covenants had to be drafted. These effectively combined multiple princely states into a new, larger Part B state within the Indian Union, a whole new category.
Wow. That sounds like an incredibly complex administrative puzzle to orchestrate. Just getting the agreements must have been tough. And as this process matured, the relationship between these new unions and the center also deepened significantly, right? Initially, accession was limited to those three original subjects, but as integration progressed, the instruments of accession were expanded, they were updated, they came to include virtually all subjects in the federal and concurrent legislative lists. The list that spell out the powers of the central and state governments, with the notable exception of taxation initially.
Yes, exactly. This was a massive undertaking. We often call it administrative consolidation. It involved fitting these incredibly diverse states with different laws, different systems into a common mold. Things like the judiciary, the army, they had to be standardized. They also had to define what constituted the private property of rulers, distinguishing it from state property. And crucially, the granting of privy purses. These were annual, tax-free payments made to the former rulers. A critical financial and, frankly, psychological incentive to secure their cooperation and smooth their transition out of direct power. This whole process was about building a cohesive administrative and legal framework across the entire nation, standardizing governance where once there were hundreds of different systems. By January 26, 1950, when the new constitution came into force, India had largely achieved geographical integration. The constitution classified these integrated units and the remaining states into a temporary structure, Part A, Part B, and Part C states. It was a framework designed to manage their varied degrees of autonomy within the new union.
So by 1950, India is geographically integrated, a colossal achievement, no doubt. But, as you hinted, that wasn't the end of territorial shifts. What did this mean for the decades that followed? Was the work truly finished then?
Far from it. No, after 1950, a whole new and really powerful movement began to emerge. The reorganization of states along linguistic lines. This wasn't just some academic debate in Delhi. It was driven by powerful mass movements, huge popular demand from the ground up. A really pivotal event was the successful agitation in the Telugu-speaking area of southern India in 1953. That struggle led directly to the creation of the new state of Andhra Pradesh, and that really set a powerful precedent for others.
And that pivotal moment led to the formalization of the process, I suppose. In 1953, the States Reorganization Commission, the SRC, was appointed to study this widespread demand. They submitted their comprehensive report in 1955.
That's right. And the SRC's recommendations were groundbreaking. They really redefined India's internal geography. They proposed redrawing India's political map primarily based on linguistic lines. That was the main principle. But crucially, they also had to balance that with broader national unity and other practical factors like economic viability, administrative convenience. It was about balancing that deep-seated cultural identity, which language often represents, with the pragmatism needed for effective governance in a young nation.
And the outcome was the States Reorganization Act, which came into effect on November 1st, 1956, leading to significant boundary changes across the entire country.
We saw some really dramatic shifts. Hyderabad state, for example, which was once this sprawling princely state, was dismantled. Its Telugu-speaking Telangana region joined with Andhra to form Andhra Pradesh. Its Marathi-speaking areas were amalgamated into what was then Bombay state, later Maharashtra, and its Kannada-speaking areas were integrated into Mysore state, later Karnataka. Peep SU, that union we mentioned, was merged into Punjab. Travancore Cochin was merged with the Malabar Coast District of Madras State to form the new state of Kerala. And this act also abolished the system of Raj Pramukhs, those appointed former rulers acting as ceremonial governors for the Part B states. They were replaced by civilian governors appointed by the president. It was really a final step in democratizing the administration of all these territories.
This was just an extraordinary period of transformation, from that fragmented collection of states to a truly unified, internally reorganized nation. But looking back, what was the overall lasting impact of this monumental project?
Well, despite the immense initial challenges, and there are many, things like a lack of experienced personnel in the new administrations, factionalism, and even some corruption in the early days, despite all that, the integration ultimately yielded profoundly positive results in the long run. We saw increased government spending on public health, on education, on community development projects in these formerly princely territories. And this led to measurable improvement in key indicators like literacy rates and life expectancy. It's a true testament, I think, to the success of this monumental integration project. It showcased that despite the initial hiccups, the larger goal of national development was being achieved across all these diverse regions, truly stitching India together not just politically, but developmentally too.
So what you've heard today is essentially how a new nation, really against incredible odds, stitched itself together, piece by piece, from over 560 disparate entities into a unified India. It was a journey through strategic accession, careful administrative consolidation, and then that eventual, quite radical, linguistic reorganization. It truly stands as a masterclass in diplomacy, statesmanship, and sheer administrative prowess, transforming a colonial patchwork into a coherent, independent nation.
And this story of integrating such diverse autonomous regions into a coherent whole, it offers powerful lessons, I think, for nation building and governance even today. Maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. What aspects of this intricate process, maybe the delicate balance they struck between autonomy and unity, or the use of incentives versus compulsion, or perhaps that phased approach they took, what aspects do you think are most relevant for navigating complex geopolitical challenges in our modern world, especially where regional identities and global integration often seem to pull in very different directions?